Good afternoon, everybody. Well done for making it to this graveyard shift. We'll power through. We've got the light of cocktails just around the corner. But for us, I think Tech4Conservation, so just some background to it. Zambia protects nearly a third of its country for wildlife, which is an incredible effort. Yet wildlife crime, habitat loss, and fragmented data systems all threaten this legacy. And so today we want to explore how technology, the use of drones, AI, satellites can enhance and continue kind of the progression into protecting these protected areas. So I'm going to dive straight in, and I think the first question is for Chanda and Sui. Just according to your organizations and respective organizations, what is it that you're currently doing? What mechanisms have you got in place? How do you balance the kind of soft protection versus the hard protection, so community engagement versus policing, and kind of what technologies are you currently using and technology you're currently using?
Good afternoon. My name is Chanda. I'm coming from Conservation Lower Zambezi. So Lower Zambezi supports the Department of National Parks since 1994. Currently, the balance between hard conservation and soft conservation is in terms of, let me break it down this way. So the hard conservation involves ground patrol teams, of course, done by the Department of National Parks, and then also vehicle and aerial patrols. The aerial patrols usually is done by Conservation Lower Zambezi, where there is a fixed wing aircraft that is used. And then the soft part of conservation involves community livelihoods. This involves communities that surrounds the protected areas in the Chiawa GMA, Lower Zambezi National Park, and the Rufunsa GMA on the eastern part of the protected parts. So just to add on the soft conservation, and in terms of supporting, COZ supports, for example, environmental education sector, where, for example, last year about 2,000 school-going children at primary level were reached in terms of conservation awareness. And then when it comes on the technology part, Conservation Lower Zambezi, we run an Earth Ranger system, which is the main system, and then in it, there are a lot of other technologies that are integrated in it. For example, this system actually provides information in real time. As things happen on the ground, we have that information. So one of the systems that are integrated in Earth Ranger is the digital radio system. So the digital radio system has a coverage of over 100 kilometers. So we are talking about ranger communication within this range. And then also the radio systems that the rangers use on the ground, these are digital radio systems, meaning they are GPS enabled. We are able to communicate or know where the rangers are with an accuracy of millimeters. Also to add on what technology that we are using, we have the satellite-based system that we are using, MODIS or FEMS, Fire Information for Resource Management System. We are using this system actually to detect the fires in the protected areas. And also other assets include the normal GPS, which rangers use in the field. And also we have the trackers like Suiranj mentioned, I think, earlier in our presentations. We are using these systems also to help respond to HWC that is happening in the community. I think, in short, I end it here.
Thank you very much. WCP carries out a lot of operations, and we largely collaborate with Department of National Parks and Wildlife. And in so doing, we support all their efforts, like security-related efforts. And by doing so, we employ different digital systems. We are also actively using Earth Ranger, not only to use this to track our animals, we are also using that on our vehicles. We use them on our mobile gadgets because I'm sure you should realize that security operations are high risk, and we want to know where our workforce is at any given time. So we are using that. When it comes to the soft part, WCP is very entrenched in communities, and we have a communications department that goes out in communities, spreading awareness concerning illegal wildlife trade activities to deter them from, for example, ingesting or consuming illegal bushmeat, which I think we are also running a campaign called This Is Not a Game, and that one is mainly to deter our communities out there not to eat these kinds of food products. And we do not only use like traditional methods to teach. We use technology. We do baseline studies. We do all manner of we use all manner of methods to reach out to these communities. And I think similarly, because we work very closely with Conservation Lower Zambezi on most fronts, so there are similar things that we do, like outlined by Chanda. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you both. I think it gives us some good context of what's happening in general. I think the next question kind of will tag team Sophie and Jack. Kind of what, in your opinion, are the most pressing challenges facing conservation and wildlife protection in Zambia today?
Thanks, Ian. So maybe a bit about where I'm coming from, WWF Finance Practice, and basically we look at green finance and raising green finance for sustainable projects, and as well as the pillars that we cover. I thought that's very important. So I had prepared a lot of notes, but I think in the interest of time, this is a topic I'm very passionate about. So what are the issues right now? I think from a background of finance and conservation, one of the key pressing issues that we don't really have a value at risk for our ecosystems and habitats and what is happening there. Because what will happen, and the example that I often give is a dead tree is actually got a value more than an alive one. And because people can actually place a value on that tree, and because people in and around ecosystems are the ones that are eroding and pressing on those ecosystems, as a means to an end, they end up cutting trees and degrading the environment. So because a dead tree has a value, you find that people actually find it more valuable to kill a tree and sell it. If we're able to place a value, for example, on our Kafue system, for example, that is key to Zambia, it drives hydropower, it irrigates a lot of farming areas, then we'll be able to also link conservation to finance. And when people have a value at risk, then we are able to place a greater importance on actually conserving it. So I think for me, the biggest pressing issue, I know there are a lot of work being done in these areas, but for so long as we always put conservation as philanthropic, it will remain just that, where grant money is going there, but there's actually no real investments that are actually driving and at the forefront of conserving our environments.
Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't agree more. The fact is that every single human relies on natural resources in some way, shape, or form. We all need clean air, we need clean water, and we all need food. But there's the separation between nature and human survival, both of which are completely connected though. And so the financing mechanisms, let alone the actual work that's done, needs to have a nature-centric focus that goes with it. And for a lot of conservation efforts, not just in Zambia, but you could say across Africa, you could say globally, is that conservation's holding the line as part of that survival. And because of the intricate nature of ecosystems and the actual need for development, particularly in Zambia, the mechanisms that actually create development, create economies, create actual jobs and employment, also a part of the destruction of the environment as well. And a classic case that people may be thinking is mining, but it could also mean just road development. How is that road now going to link different markets, different demand for wildlife products, and how is that translating directly to the source? And as human populations expand, the need for conservation as part of our survival as humans, it's very underlooked across all sectors for everything. Ultimately, as much as it can actually seem, it's about, fluffy, cool animals, maybe some photogenic elephants and an awesome forest. The reality is we need these ecosystems to survive, and that separation between wider development and conservation is ultimately fueling a humanitarian crisis.
Awesome, thank you. And I think a conference I was recently at around natural capital and nature positive financing kind of fits into that. And then the spill on for that is, how do you measure that? How do you quantify biodiversity preservation? How do you quantify protecting nature? And I think that's a good segue into the use of technology, AI to crunch data, drones and satellites to collect the data that we need to look at that over time. And so maybe, Dorita, I can ask you in terms of, how do you see what technology is available within this conservation space, and how would we use drones, technology, AI in this space?
Thank you, Jan. I think that there's a lot of space for technology in conservation. Satellites can do amazing things today, especially like when we use analytics to analyze satellite imagery. And of course, drones in the fight against poachers is super important, because I think it's only realistic for us to realize that in the future, the poachers will also be using the drones. I know that they're already using these in some countries, and you need drones that can basically counter them. I think this is an important part. But the more important thing I think that we should discuss here today is what is the problem about the absorption of technology, because sometimes there's a lack between like the connection of high technology and people who have to implement this. And this is, I think, what Jack and Chanda and everyone can basically give us more insight in, is how can we basically make this technology accessible and also that it's useful. It doesn't help we have technology and it's like really big, but it's not absorbed by the people, right? So I would like to ask Jack this question, actually.
Dorita, that was my next question aimed at Jack, but I think if anybody else wants to chip in there, kind of, how does this integration actually look like? Like, how do we do this, to that question?
So technology fundamentally enhances human performance. And factoring that in, if you look at conservation organizations, again, across Africa, not just Zambia, how much WhatsApp and Excel spreadsheets are the key technology tools that drive decision making. So it's the ability to communicate and the ability to process data. How is that actually linking to the human performance side, and is it actually integrating into systems that are used operation-wise? Is it actually something that's going to value add and actually enhance efficiency, or is it something that, and again paraphrasing Bill Gates for this, but is it also just applying more inefficiencies to something that's inefficient? Is it actually integrating into how things actually work on the ground, within teams, within operation cycles? And ultimately, you can have the best technology, the best data available, but is that supporting the human? Is that supporting human decision making? We saw really, really good examples of satellite imagery and different spectral imagery that can be provided, which is fantastic. How is that then being applied as part of a decision-making process to actually drive change on the ground? And I think that's the key with that integration. Is the human capacity there, and are the other enabling systems part of that in place, or do they need to be in place to actually maximize the use of technology?
Brilliant. Chanda, anything to add on that?
Thank you, Jack, for that. Just to add on what Jack has said, I'll talk much on the use of drones, the integration, what it would look like. For example, conservation Lower Zambezi, we have a licensed drone pilot who is the operation manager, but the drone that we currently have, it has limited capabilities. So for the tech innovators that are here, must make sure that, for example, the Lower Zambezi landscape is a harsh landscape where when building these things, you need to take into what is available on the ground. So probably most what can be integrated in is the coverage. You should have mostly the coverage maybe of more than 10 kilometers or so. I think that way it is something that will be useful. Thank you.
Awesome. Sui, maybe back to you. How would we make sure that these tools are co-designed with end users so they're kind of practical and sustainable over the long term?
Thank you very much. Chanda has just said it would be a very good thing to have a conversation with maybe the people who innovate these particular devices, because I'll give you an example with our post-release monitoring that we had with the pangolins. Our project site, which was Lower Zambezi, is not a very easy terrain. It's a very rough terrain. It's got escarpments, there's mountains there's crevices, there's barrows. It's not a very straightforward kind of area. So the tracking devices that we had, for example, the satellite trackers, would go maybe 4 or 5 days, we haven't gotten any updates. And probably this pangolin is somewhere in the escarpments, maybe under, and there's no communication between the GPS tracker with the satellite. So each time these devices are being manufactured, maybe there should be some kind of conversation between the users, the end users, and the manufacturers, so that we get the most and the best out of these tracking devices. It's not like a one size fits all.
Absolutely. So it's sitting and talking with feet on the ground, with technology up here, and trying to find the marriage between the two and how we design these and co-design these. In terms of that, Sophie, back to you, kind of, are there any examples in Zambia or the wider region where innovation has tangibly improved conservation outcomes?
Thanks, Ian. I think probably the easiest, the CC bond that uses technology. I think normally we're looking at it from a digitization point of view. So there we have PV technology that's turning solar energy to be able to power up industries. And what that has done is that it's also brought off so much pressure on hydropower, which is also relying on very key ecosystems that we have, right, that are also being unsustainably managed. But maybe just to build up, I think, on my colleagues and some of the examples they have given, when I walked out, actually, there's a conference I attended that was actually looking at the power of digitization and the fact that about 400 million metric tons of paper is consumed each year, moving back and forth. And just that on its own, which translates to about 6.8 billion trees that are being cut down in order for that to happen. So when we talk about innovations, when we talk about how innovations are able to drive and tech for conservation, is there always has to be a link, and I'll always bring the finance link, because there has to be an investment in that, and there has to be a linkage on how also industries can benefit to be able to drive that. I think in ecosystems as well, what should happen, I think we've spoken about drones and investment in drones. A lot of this is coming from us, the NGOs, trying to drive that, because we actually see the value in our ecosystems. But those investments should come from the people degrading those industries and making use of those industries. So I feel there's a lot of examples, and I think the CC bond is one classic example of that. I think MNOs are also playing a very big role in that space in terms of putting together data that can be used to impact livelihoods that also have an impact on conservation. I've never talked this fast, but I hope my message is being very clear. Thank you.
×5. Jack, any further examples from the work you do with Linear in terms of successes?
Yeah, no, it was even briefly presented in Louis' presentation when it comes to the elephant collaring and our partner in Mozambique, MWA. And so what they've set up is protected farming communities. And so that's also, I guess, with that integration when it comes to the community side, and has also become the national model in Mozambique for HWC mitigation, but also understanding. Yeah. So collaring elephants to understand their movement patterns and behaviours, especially because elephants now, due to decreased rangeland, are moving into communities that have never had to deal with elephants for generations. And so, if you've seen an elephant, let alone in a vehicle or just on foot, they're pretty big, they're pretty scary, and they're pretty hungry. And so these protected farming communities are all about providing hectares of land around villages and co-develop with full accountability and ownership with the actual community that's receiving it. So that comes with fence line development, so electric fences to prevent elephants from coming in, more sustainable agricultural practices, how to mitigate any incursions when elephants do breach a fence line, but also providing early warning and rapid response to that as well. And so that national level, or that use of technology at a national level to integrate that within how they mitigate human-wildlife conflict, but also work with communities as well, is seeing massive success.
Amazing. And an example we have in Botswana is doing some work around biobarriers, so using pack sense, animal sense to collar goats or to put that along fences and gates. and seeing some success with wild dogs turning around, with leopards turning around and moving away from those areas. So a lot of cool things happening. In terms of kind of like the broader adoption of technology into conservation, Chanda, what would be your kind of biggest challenge into adopting this on a greater scale?
Thank you, Ian. I think the biggest challenge would be the durability of the equipment that we are using, because over the years we've seen the high tier and wear of this technology that we are using. So I think this would be the greatest part. So once this is sort of built locally, I think that challenge, will be addressed. Thank you.
Awesome. Sorry, you grabbed the mic.
Yes, because I had a lot of challenges. Among them, not only the durability, we also have these custom-made equipment, which, we are not experts. We go to a manufacturer and we tell them we want this to happen. That has been a challenge. They cannot reprint what we exactly want to do. And unfortunately, because we are in a lesser developed country, we end up getting equipment that is close to obsolete. And within a few years, if we want to replace that equipment, we'll be told we don't manufacture that anymore. Yeah. So that is a huge challenge. The cost also, I'll give you an example. Those little trackers you saw on the pangolins, one of them would be costing now about 20,000 kwacha each. And I need 2 on one pangolin. And they only have battery life, say, for 9 months. And I'm supposed to track these animals for 2 years. So you can do the arithmetic, and you see that the cost actually sometimes is overboard, despite the fact that we are getting this information back. But I think the cost of the trackers is a problem. The biggest problem, trying to get to work with these digital or these devices, we need a lot of authority from a lot of organizations. We have to go to, if it's drones, for example, you need to go to civil aviation. If it's the very high frequency transmitters, you need to go to ZICTA. Yeah. If it's maybe authority to go into the park, you need to go to DNPW. If you're going to fly drones, ZAF also should be involved. So, there's a lot of institutional, maybe red tape, I should call it. And I don't know if this is the point. I would suggest that probably we can compress all these statutory regulations or requirements into like one chunk or one document, so that I'm not running back and forth, because I'll tell you that it will take you almost a year to try and put all these things together before you can finally ground break. So I think that is one of the challenges biggest challenge we faced.
One of the multiple challenges. Yeah. Jack, maybe something that wasn't brought up here. So you've got regulation, financing, durability of equipment, but kind of local knowledge, strengthening capacity on the ground around the use of these training. How would you go about, or thoughts on how you strengthen that, how you get adoption into those spaces?
Well, it goes back to what's been mentioned before, but tech literacy. And so, what's the start point for the actual knowledge of basic technologies that are there? And everyone in this room here lives with a rectangle in our pockets that often and sadly dictates our lives. And technology is getting more and more intuitive now. Yeah. But one of the challenges also comes from where most conservation staff are hired from is very rural and remote areas. Yeah. And so that ground level start when it comes to how to actually use technology is a challenge in itself, but then also its application. And so if we take drones, for example, and don't get me wrong, I think drones are fantastic and definitely have their place, but how do you then put that into a decision-making cycle? And then what are the capacity gaps for that? How do you integrate that within the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance needs, let's say at a park level, but then have a field operation manager, a park manager be able to use that for their law enforcement planning, conservation planning as well, and identifying those needs. And that comes down to the relationship with the protected area, department, NGO, community, whatever it may be, seeing what those needs are beyond just what the technology is as well. Because everything relies, and You would have seen from Lou's presentation as well, is that we think in systems, because everything functions in a system. Are there the logistics that can enable something like a drone? Is there just the electrical generation capacity to fly a drone? And so looking at all those other things that work with technology and seeing where those different gaps are, and then seeing how those can be filled.
Awesome. Did you have, Dorita, do you want to add? No. Sophie?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. I think maybe just to build up on Jack, one of the things I think I have noticed is that oftentimes we and this comes from even where I work, we make an assumption that local indigenous knowledge isn't there. I think there's a lot of local indigenous knowledge that's there. They understand. People know even when the rains are coming before tech came, so just trying to bridge that gap. I think the real gap for me is sometimes the adoption and trying to include them in that process, because they have been in and around those areas, hundreds, some of them have great grandfathers there, and they understand those ecosystems pretty well. I think if you're able to include them in that process to understand what you're doing based on that indigenous and local knowledge, I think then the adoption will be there. So I think that gap sometimes is there, where the assumption is they don't know. Maybe they do know, actually most of the times, maybe we're just not including them very properly early on into that process.
Awesome. We're steaming to the end here. So just final two questions, and I'll divide them up between the teams. But between Dorita and Sophie, kind of what innovations or systems would you prioritize for investment and collaboration into Zambia? What would you, from your respective spaces, what would you prioritize in terms of innovation?
I think in terms of innovation in Zambia, it's very important to create local industry for something, and especially for localizing the manufacturing of drones, and also perhaps having some sort of educational program to actually train drone pilots, because this can also empower entire community of people, and it can give people a lot of skills. So I think this is the kind of technology that should be pushed in conservation drones, but also educating people how to use them. So yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Awesome. Sophie?
It will always come from a finance aspect.
Yeah, totally.
And there's a reason why, because I hear, and maybe to Sui's point as well, she's speaking about the cost of drones and how much it will cost her to tag a pangolin. And sitting where she sits, she understands what the value is of that, and they will invest in that. But where I feel I would definitely put my investment really is on driving the value of those. There are industries that depend on wildlife and forestry. Ecotourism. If you go to Livingston, that is the drive, and that actually what maintains our states, and then that's directly connected to economies as well. So if we're able to put a value, not a price, I know I've made this mistake before and I almost had my head taken off, but if we're able to put a value, and I always ask Teddy, who's head of wildlife and forestry, I said, if you can tell me an elephant is roughly worth $1 million, you will see investment go there. You won't have to look for the investment, because people understand that one elephant dying will directly affect that industry. Now, is it the way we want to do things? Primarily, no. But ideally, I would definitely put my money on really driving the fact that this is not philanthropic. There's actually a value that carries also, and it trickle-on effects onto the economy. And in doing so, you can actually now let go when you've done your part, and investments will flow there very easily.
Awesome, thank you. Then last question to Chanda, Jack and Sui. Kind of project yourself 5 years, 10 years down the road. What does success look like for you in Tech for Conservation?
I'll start. Yeah, 5 years from now, first of all, we all know that women numbers outnumber the men populations. I would like to see more women in conservation, especially in those rough terrains where we sleep in tents and lions are roaring and there's all kinds of danger there. I would like to see women in there. As WCP, we have made deliberate steps where we provide mentorship programs. We take care of journalists. We want to mentor them in environmental crimes reporting, so that they know exactly what they are reporting about, because that is a big gap currently in Zambia. You hear about, I had an experience, you hear that somebody's carrying a pangolin. I was stopped at the airport because they heard that I was carrying a penguin. So if a reporter is there, they'll write about a penguin, and I'll have nothing to say about a penguin because I I've not seen one here in Zambia. Yeah, so in 5 years, I hope there'll be more women, there'll be more youths involved in conservation and other marginalized groups. And because the women out there are the ones who are using a lot of our natural resource, they live on firewood, they live on water, they live on mushrooms and many other things. So I would like to see women standing up in conservation. Thank you.
Awesome. Jack?
Mine's pretty short and sweet for this, is that it's not seen as an innovation, that it's actually just normal practice and its utilization of different technologies and the different technologies that are applied in different sectors being utilized within conservation.
Awesome. Chanda?
Thank you. Just to add on to Suiranji's, where she wants to see more women in conservation. So conservation in Lower Zambezi currently has, in support with the DNPW, they have actually two female teams called Kufaza. So these teams are comprised completely of females. And then where I want to see, since I'm coming from the data side, I would want to see a fully integrated systems where we are using drones, not fixed-wing aircraft. The reason being is that a pilot in an aeroplane, they will just, for example, pick coordinates where things happen, but if you are using drones, we'll be able to pick imagery of that area, and also the drones are quieter. So we are going to have, effective results from that end. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Chanda. And proudly to blow my own trumpet, the Kufadza ladies are funded by African Bush Camps Foundation. So it's one of our flagship projects where we fund those ladies. And I think it's, to your point, it's so critical that we start absorbing more females into a very male-dominated space. So which kind of the conclusion on this is probably more public-private partnerships, more collaboration, more using technology as the norm, and the integration that into protecting these landscapes that we want to see connected and thriving, and communities that are thriving around these landscapes as well. So thank you very much to the panel, and have a good afternoon. I was going to say evening on slip of the tongue. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you.